Hey guys, welcome back to wemetatacme. I am so excited for this episode today. It's a solo episode, and I'm going to try not to click my pen into the mic. It's going to be about if men want accomplished women, or rather why dating is hard for the ambitious woman, or perhaps the more successful the woman, the harder it is to date. I haven't really squared in on the title just yet, but you'll obviously know it by the time you're listening. I feel like this has come up so much in society and pop culture, in like different publications recently. You know, I'm sure you've seen the article in the Wall Street Journal about how American women are giving up on marriage. And a lot of that article is about how, you know, the women don't want to be the one who is the primary parent, who's also bringing in the most money, who's also, you know, it's just such a load, right? And so this episode is essentially going to be about just what, like, if it's just busting the myth or not myth about how men actually feel towards accomplished women. So getting right into it, I also want to say that I texted a ton of my guy friends, some of which you know, and I'll reveal them. I don't think they want to be kept secret, so don't worry. And I got their opinion on it. I also have asked Wolf, who's in the room right now. I talked to my husband about it. This is a subject that I have done my research on, and I'm here to tell you my probably very disorganized thoughts on it. And we'll kind of go through this together. So when I first had this conversation, I had it with my husband, and he's going to kill me for kind of sharing some of his thoughts, but I don't think he's listening, so we'll keep it a secret between us. If you don't tell him, we're good. He basically said that most men, not all men, but most men are looking for women to like light up their lives, right? To make their lives easier, to bring peace into their lives in a lot of ways. And many of the time when you're finding a woman who's extremely ambitious and, you know, boss-like, and I think there's also different levels of ambition, but let's use a partner at a hedge fund as an example of an ambitious woman, right? A woman who worked her way up to the top of a predominantly male-dominated business, right? This type of woman can be more likely to be hard-headed and challenging, right? Because these are traits. Yes, they're masculine traits, but they're traits in general that can go either way that you probably need to get to the top of a corporate ladder per se, right? And so if a guy wants peace, but ambition doesn't necessarily breed peace. Do you know what I'm saying? Like, you don't typically relax when you're a super ambitious person. You're not coming home to this person and they're, you know, hi, sweetie, how was your day? They want to talk about the next thing. They want to do the next thing. And so not everyone is like that as a woman, but that can be part of it. And so I think that what men want today, and this is why it's so hard and potentially why American women are giving up on marriage, is because a man actually does want you to be ambitious. A man actually does want you to be successful. You know, he wants you to be able to contribute to the relationship. Not all men, right? But financially and have your own thing that makes you happy and lights you up. But he also doesn't want your maternal instincts, your femininity to take a back seat. So men are out there wanting a trad wife who's also a fucking boss and does everything, right? Like, is the mom, cares about the kids first and foremost, but also makes a killer living. And it's just so unrealistic. Yet so many of us are still trying to do that for men. Like, I listen to Erin and Sarah Foster's podcast, which I love, and I've had them on the podcast, and I think they're amazing. And I don't think she would be offended by me saying this, but Erin Foster talks a lot about how she likes to cook for her husband. He likes when she cooks for him, and she, takes care of him. But she's also out there writing a hit show, running a fashion company, this and that. And so it's like just doing the absolute most is, I guess, the new way to satisfy this man of today, right? Which is really hard because back when my parents were, getting together and my mom was like saying to my dad, I don't work, I'm going to stay home with the kids. That was it. That was her role. She stayed home with the kids. He didn't expect her to do anything else. And I wonder why this is, right? Like, is it because the cost of living, especially in New York City, is so egregious that if you want to raise a family here, you have to be a little bit of everything? I was just talking to my girlfriend at dinner, and she was telling me how one of her friends quit. And this is a friend who is a litigator. She's a very successful lawyer at a very successful firm. And she has two kids who are, getting older and are starting school. And she quit her job because it's so unmanageable nowadays. And she still has a nanny, she has full-time help, but that's not even enough nowadays, which is so crazy and just so crazy to hear. If you have a job that puts you in an office, as a woman, as the primary parent, which the woman typically is, that puts you in an office 5 days a week, you cannot be a mom and run your household even passively and also work at that company. There's just no way you can do it because, first of all, a nanny can only do so much. A nanny is a human being. It's one person, right? So you have that person taking care of two kids, let's say, but these two kids are on completely different schedules unless they're twins, right? One is napping at some point. One is in the park. One needs to be fed at this point, but the other one needs to be fed at that point, and a different kind of thing, right? Someone needs purees. Someone needs real food. And who's getting these kids dressed in the morning if the mom has to run out first thing to her job? Who is answering the calls from the school? These schools are so demanding. They need participation from the parents. It's crazy. So unless you have one of those, and we've had episodes where we talked about this, the one with Emily DiDonato, we had the one with Neha Rush. It's so hard to do it all, to be everything. It's not what it used to be. And I just find that really interesting. I don't know necessarily how related that is, but I thought it was so fascinating to hear that this person who was so successful, had so much going on in her career, couldn't and who was able to do so much, actually couldn't handle both, right? And I think it's really hard. And I think going back to, do men want accomplished women? If you ask a man this, it's really unlikely that a man's going to say, no, I don't want an accomplished woman, right? It's just unlikely. Even if they don't, I just don't think that they're going to flat out say it. And we'll get into what all the men that I spoke to said, but it's just, it makes me think of the Craig and Paige situation where, I don't know if you watch Summer House, but in case you don't, I'll give you a little recap, which is that Paige DeSorbo was dating this guy, Craig Conover, and they both started on a similar playing field, maybe Craig even on a bigger playing field. He came from Southern Charm, another reality show. He was making reality TV money for years and years, probably had a big paycheck. Then Paige came in and was doing Summer House, probably not as big of a paycheck. Then she started to, become a fan favorite. She started to probably get more money from the show. But then in addition, she started this podcast with Hannah Berner called Giggly Squad. And it reached the top charts of podcasting. They went on like a 100-city tour, and they're extremely successful in their own right now, whereas Craig is just kind of still a reality star. I think he has like a clothing label or something, like some sort of label. But she has surpassed him in terms of success, it seems. And they've briefly kind of touched upon that on the show. And then this is kind of unrelated to this, but Craig was recent, but it just made me think of this. Craig on a recent Summer House episode was talking to Jesse Solomon, who is one of the guys that you're going to hear from that I texted about this subject today. And he said, in regards to Jesse's kind of dating different girls on the show, and Craig is like, and Jesse's like, how do you not look at other girls? How do you like find one girlfriend and stick to it? So and so, because he had just become exclusive with this girl, Lexi, on the show. And Craig says something that is actually a lot more prolific than I think he ever realized, and has gotten a lot of my friends and I and my husband and I talking, which is, he said, quote, "You date your number one. You date the girl that you would want to cheat on your girlfriend with. Until you meet that girl, don't date anyone." And I found this so fascinating. And I found this actually very true. And I think it's similar to what I've been telling you guys for so long when it comes to dating and the rules and all of that. Like, you want to be like, a man will really only be loyal and like stick with you if he feels really lucky to have you. If he feels like you're a catch and he's the like schlub or whatever, right? And this encompasses kind of everything that I've been saying for so long, which is that they have to feel so lucky to have you that they would never fuck this up for anything in the world. And I don't think it's like you date the girl that you'd want to cheat on your girlfriend with in terms of looks. I think obviously looks are always a factor, but I think in this case, his comment is a personality thing, not a hot thing. It's like you have to find that personality that really does it for you. And I think this actually goes back to the whole conversation about, do men want someone who's ambitious, this and that? Because men have a choice, just like we have a choice when choosing a partner, right? And you can choose someone who is totally one thing, right? So like totally maternal and totally, not ambitious, whatever the opposite of ambitious is. What is the opposite of ambition? I'm so curious. I'm actually going to look it up if there's like a direct opposite. What is the opposite of ambition? Okay, I knew they were going to say lazy, but it's not lazy. It's not lazy in this case. And actually, wait, Wolf, will you help me lift this mic a little bit?
Yeah, sure.
It's not lazy in the case of taking care of a kid, right? It's just doing something else that's really important. It's like playing a different role. But I wish there was a different way of putting it, because it's definitely not lazy. Thank you. But anyway. And then Craig also said something that I actually really disagree with. And he said, when you meet your person, you don't want to do anything else but hang out with them. And this is where he lost me, because I was like, yeah, no, that's giving codependent. And it sounds like he was super codependent on Paige, because when you meet your person is actually when you feel comfortable doing other things and not just hanging out with them, right? It's like they help you spread your wings and fly. And if you're too scared to leave them, that's when you're not in the right relationship. You know what I'm saying? Like, the right relationship is what then makes you, oh, I can do this. I can go hang out with my friends. I can go on this girls trip. I can go follow my dreams because I have that, I hate the word rock. It's not the best term, but like that, anchor to hold me down in my relationship. And that's, I think, actually the mark of a good relationship. And that made me be like, okay, well, this is why, this is part of why they're not going to work out and they eventually broke up. But anyway, going back to what I said about how I asked my guy friends this, I'm going to read you some of their answers because I find them to be really eye-opening. Okay. So, what I said verbatim was, I'm recording an episode today and I'm asking all the single guys in my life this, if you have the time to answer. Is there any reason you wouldn't want to date or would be deterred to date a very accomplished and ambitious woman? So the first friend of mine said, no reason whatsoever. I'm personally attracted to women who are independent thinkers who are typically ambitious. And then I actually ended up asking a follow-up question to everyone, which is a totally different subject, which we're going to get into also. But that was one answer. Another one said, not at all. And by the way, these are guys, all of these friends of mine are accomplished and like successful men. This person said, not at all. We all have our strengths. We'll elevate together. Okay. This person said, well, this is actually really funny. This is my friend, Sam Morrell, who's a comedian. And he goes, his first response was, how did you know I was single? Because apparently he was literally packing up his ex's stuff when I texted him that. He said, no, I'm fine with ambitious women. My only issue is due to my insane travel. He's a comedian. Is if they're not in the city much and our schedules never align, what's the point? Okay, fair. This friend of mine gave a very thoughtful answer, and he's single, ladies. He said, most importantly, I'm honored to be a single guy in your life. I grew up in a house where both my parents worked. My mom retired more recently than my dad. Being in a family where my mom wasn't a doorpost and instead really contributed made a big impact on me. It made me want to marry someone who works, and even more so, someone who is on a similar level of success as me. I think the idea of being a power couple is so cool. Both people contribute, make the other stronger, and can render advice. You can also be dinks and make more money. Dinks is double income, no kids. So if anything, I want to marry someone successful and accomplished. I will say, however, that I briefly just dated someone way more accomplished than me. It was slightly intimidating, but only because of my apparent insecurity and didn't actually matter or bother me at all. So this is obviously a very self-aware man. He's a Capricorn, like my son. And, it's interesting. He admitted that it was intimidating to him. And it brought up insecurity that he might not have known that he had. So, okay. Then I just clarified some stuff about kids, blah, blah, blah. And we'll get more into the other topic because that's really important. This was another response. He said, this friend said, it could be emasculating / intimidating for some men. Some men might prefer a woman to be more involved with raising children and the home versus the office. Those are the only reasons I could think of. And then he asked me, what do I think? And I said, I think it's possible that women who have the qualities that would make them a partner at a hedge fund or something may not necessarily have the qualities that translate into qualities a man is looking for in a wife. Okay? So whenever, women are like, no, he's just intimidated by me and my success, I don't think it's that as much as I think it's, no, you just don't have the qualities that he's looking for, like the personality aspect, or the personality traits that he's looking for. And I'm not saying that all women who are successful and accomplished are unattractive to men. Absolutely not. That's literally the opposite of what I'm saying. And as you're hearing, that's the opposite of the reality. But I'm saying that men don't know what they're looking for a lot of the time. And they will tell you that they do. And it will be up to you to figure out that, in fact, they don't. And I'm not sitting here saying I know what all men are attracted to. But I'm saying that a man may think he wants an ambitious woman when in fact he wants someone who's capable of that and even more capable of taking care of the home and taking care of the kids and taking care of him and leaning into her femininity. So I think it's less like, oh, men are intimidated by me and are jealous of my success and don't think that they'll measure up, and more like, no, they might not be attracted to the qualities that made you brought you to where you are today. And, I was talking to Wolf about this before, and we were talking about how it can be hard with a woman like that because she might not give you the opportunity to feel like a man. And at the end of the day, men can be very simple and they want to feel like men. So it's like when men are masculine, right? Their masculinity can't take a day off. So maybe it's a little unfair, and like, don't worry, I don't feel bad for men, but maybe it's a little unfair that they have to be masculine all of the time. And we get to switch from being feminine to masculine when it serves us at work or at home, right? And I think that maybe because females are so dynamic and, women are so dynamic that it's almost like we do this to ourselves. And it's like almost our own fault that we have so many expectations of us, right? Because if you think of a man, right? Whenever I do dating consultations and I talk to women and they show me their conversations and they've asked a man 2 questions, right? They've asked a man 2 questions at once. They've said, what time do you want to do dinner Saturday? And did you end up texting Joan? The man is going to respond to one of those questions because men cannot multitask. That is just a fact. Show me a man that can multitask, I will be shocked. Men cannot multitask. So I always say, ask them one question at a time. They can't multitask. But women, we can hold our baby, we can pump, we can be on a sales call, and we can be, painting our nails and also online shopping on our phone. We can do 100 things at once. And maybe that's why there's such a high expectation of us to be the trad wife and to be the boss and to handle their kid schedule, to do it all, because we've proved time and time again that we can. Whereas men have proved time and time again that they can only do one thing, which is be masculine, make money, and come home, And I don't know, maybe we're the problem, like in a good way, because we're so fucking cool. Anyway, okay, so that was that person. And then I asked another friend of mine, and he said, for me, I'll read you the question one more time because we've gone off on a little tangent. Is there any reason you wouldn't want to date or would be deterred to date a very accomplished and ambitious woman? This friend said, for me, I would be deterred if I felt the career ambition would get in the way of being present enough with the kids. I guess I'm a boring conservative guy. Okay? So there you have it, right? If there is an answer that maybe some women are looking for to validate. So I think what's so confusing about this episode, what's so confusing about this concept, and why I can't give you this is the answer, all men want accomplished women or all men don't want accomplished women, because all men, men want different things and different men want different types of women. Everyone needs, that's why, some men love bitches, right? And some men want a woman who doesn't really say much and just kind of smiles. There's all different strokes for different folks. And I think that's why this can't be a sweeping generalization, which is so hard for me because I love black and white concepts. But this man basically straight up said, he wouldn't want it to get in the way of being present enough with the kids. That's just what he said. And that's what he feels. And maybe that's because of the way he was raised, And I think that has a lot to do with it. Like my other friend said, he was raised by a really hardworking mom, and that made him want to look for that. Maybe this man was raised by a very present mom, and that's why he's looking for that, And then last but not least, our favorite Jesse Solomon said, for me, absolutely not, meaning like he would absolutely not be deterred. He said, the only reason I could think of is if the dude was insecure that his chick was more boss than him. So funny the way he talks. Or if he wanted his wife to take care of the kids, but I'm good with us making money and hiring the sitter. And this is really interesting because I feel like he put it in a way that the mom, like the woman in the situation, would have no guilt, because he's basically saying, I'm good with both of us doing our thing and someone else kind of taking care of the kids, which you don't hear men say a lot, because most men will say, I'm good as long as she can still first and foremost take care of the kids, right? So it's like most of the men are saying as long as it comes before the career, whereas Jesse in this case is saying as long as someone's taking care of the kids. Again, another situation entirely, right? So now we have like 3 different men in this situation. We have one who wants you to take care of the kids first and foremost, 2 who wants you to do both, but you have to prioritize taking care of the kids. And the third, which in Jesse's case is, go make your bag or whatever it's called. Take your bread, you know what I'm saying? And don't worry, the kids will be fine. And so I think it's really interesting. I also think that, I never brought up kids in this scenario. I never said, I'll read it again. I said, is there any reason you wouldn't want to date or would be deterred to date a very accomplished or ambitious woman? I never said anything about kids. Yet every man answered, for the most part, how it would relate to them as a mother. So it is really interesting, and it goes back to kind of my conversation with Tinks that day about if she says on the dates if she wants to be a mom or not, if she wants to have kids or not, because it really is true. Like, it is a turnoff to men if you don't want to have kids. And it's most men, right? The men that I polled in this scenario. And that doesn't mean that as a woman you should change how you are to get a man. It's just interesting that that's where a man goes. And I'm sure there's men out there who don't feel this way. But the men in my world all kind of relate it to kids. So it is really interesting to hear that. And then another man very helpfully just said no. Cool. Thanks, Andrew. Okay, so I'm going to now pivot to the other question I asked, which I find very interesting. So a friend of mine said you should also discuss marrying a woman who comes from big money. And I was like, wow, that is so interesting. And that I feel like is never spoken about. So we're going to get into it. So I said, do you mean like, is it intimidating to compete with the girl's father because she's used to so much being provided by him? And he said, yeah, that's the main one. Living her family's life versus starting your own together. And I was like, wow, that's a really good point, right? So then I asked, I went back to all the guys and I asked this question. I said, would you feel any type of way or intimidated at all to marry someone who comes from big money? So this friend said, not at all. When you're building a life together, more is always better, however large or small. Okay. This person said, so this is just for context, this is the same person who said he would be deterred if he felt that career ambition would get in the way of being present enough with the kids. And he said, I think I would feel even more pressure to not be a mediocre loser. And I said, good pressure or stressful pressure? And he said, good. And I found that really interesting. And also kind of going back to the previous conversation we were having, I was also talking to my husband who went to Harvard Business School about this subject. And I mentioned that only because it's relevant here. Not to be like, oh my God, he went to this business school at Harvard. Because out of all of his friends, and he had a large group of friends at school, not one of them ended up with, actually, sorry, there is one of them that did. But other than that one friend, not one of them ended up with any of the women who were attending Harvard Business School. And I find that really interesting. And even though all of these men are sitting here saying, yeah, I want ambitious, yeah, I want ambition, yet none of them entertained the idea of a woman on the same level as them who also was at this school. Do you know what I'm saying? So just food for thought. Okay. So I asked that one that, and then I asked this one, and okay, hold on. Wrong one. Okay. And he said, so this is the one that gave me the thoughtful answer about how his mom was, how he grew up. He said, again, I'll read it to you. Would you feel any type of way or intimidated at all to marry someone who comes from big money? He said, yeah, I think so, but it depends on the family. Some guys, and obviously girls, actively want to marry into money. I almost prefer not to. And I know that's very me specific, but I like that I have to make it on my own. And I don't know if I'd want to work for my wife's family. I have an ex's family who was very loaded, but like great family and wouldn't have been weird at all, but not 1 billion loaded. And I said, why do you think that is? I'd almost think that they wouldn't. Wait, no. Oh, yeah. I said, I'd almost think that men wouldn't want to marry someone with more, someone from a family with more than they have, because it can be emasculating and more difficult to start your own family things versus taking on their own. And then I said, that's so ick to me working for the wife's family. Because I got to be honest with you, it is. It really is. I don't know how some men do it, and like, good for you, I don't think I could ever be attracted to someone who started working for my dad or something, like I gave them the career, but they didn't come up with it on their own. Like, it's bad enough for men to work for their own families, which like, okay, I'll come around, there's lots of situations where it makes sense. It's a family business, yada, yada. But to work for your wife's family and not be emasculated by that, I know I'm going to get so much shit for this, but that's just so not cute. It's just like not the vibe. I don't know. I feel really bad saying it. And I'm sure there are situations where like there was a random layoff and there was no choice and he had to bring in for the kids and whatever. But come on, like, do your own thing, Anyway, he said, I don't know. I think maybe I like that I have no choice but to crush it on my own. And that's what makes me so ambitious. And I don't want anything to change that. But at the same time, he said, I don't think I'd lose my ambition if I married into money. So I'm not exactly sure. But I think it might feel weird spending my wife's family's money. And I was like, yeah, that makes a lot of sense because, men have egos, especially as it relates to bringing home the bacon. And I think that, and I've seen it happen in friends' relationships and, situations where a man doesn't necessarily want to accept a down payment on a house from a woman's family because it makes them feel bad that they have to go to this person and almost that the wife has to do it behind the man's back so as to not make him feel bad about it. And I think that's really interesting. And I think that's where values come into play, right? Like the values that you have around money are very important, that they're aligned, especially if one side comes from money and the other doesn't. You have to be aligned on how much will we accept from this family or not accept, right? Not everyone's family who has money is generous in that way. And so I just think all of that is so interesting. And then I asked the same question to another man. I said, would you feel any type of way or be intimidated at all to marry someone who comes from big money? He said, depends on her relationship to money and how it affects her, and if the family is charged by it. I don't know if he meant charged or change. I said, but no intimidation by the dad is a factor. And he said, not at all. There's never been a parent. Well, this is just little confident over here. I haven't won over in past relationships. If anything, women I've dated from wealthy families have idolized their dads and were extra nervous to introduce them to me, but it always ended up better than expected. Just want to make sure I read all of the responses here. I think I did. Oh, no, I didn't read Jesse's. He said, no, I wouldn't be intimidated as long as I make my own money and don't suckle the teat of her dad. So that goes back to, as long as he is doing his own thing and not working for the dad and all of a sudden just like, trying to get everything from the dad and trying to get the dad to fund their life and their lifestyle. So it's all very interesting, this subject. I feel like, we could talk about it for so long. I feel like Jesse actually was like, I should come on and we should discuss it. So maybe we'll do that. But I think, I don't really know if there's an answer here. As I said in the beginning, I guess we'll go back to the 3 questions at the beginning. Do men want accomplished women? Yes, with caveats, right? Why is dating hard for the ambitious woman? I think because perhaps the ambitious woman has qualities that are not typically feminine, or is leaning into qualities that are not typically looked at as feminine at that time. And so that's why when so many ambitious women work with dating coaches and matchmakers, the dating coach is constantly trying to get the woman to lean into her feminine, which we talked about on the Tinks episode 2 weeks ago. And, the woman is struggling with that because they have spent so long and so much front-facing energy on their masculine that they kind of lose sight of what their feminine is. And I think as a result, a lot of the ambitious women end up with, or can end up with, a softer, I hate the word soft, but it's hard to find a different one in this case, a, gentler, more feminine man, because that's the polarity that's working for them. I think Stephen brought a lot of my feminine out, and I wrote a Substack article on this, on the We Met at Acme Substack. And after meeting him, all of a sudden I'm cooking more, and all of a sudden I'm making my house nicer and more feminine, and just like wearing dresses and things like that. And I've always had a feminine side of dressing, but maybe leaning into it more, like dressing up to cook for him and things like this, that I did not do at all for any guys that I dated before him. And I think, I think that it's just, I don't really know what my point was there. I kind of lost it. My mom brain is kicking in, but I think that you just, you have it inside of you. My point was that after meeting Steven, I started leaning into my feminine, blah, blah, blah. Before meeting Steven, I was always pretty much hands down, except for like maybe 2 relationships, the masculine in my relationships. And as a result, I was attracting feminine guys, and they didn't seem feminine from the outside, not at all. I mean, like rugged soccer playing guys, but emotionally feminine. And like behind closed doors, I was like leading that situation. And I remember one of the people I dated, I don't want to like dox them too much, but super masculine seeming guy. But like when we would cuddle, he would put his hand on, or his head on my chest instead of the other way around. And it's such a subtle thing, but it really turned me off. Like I was so disgusted by it, especially towards the end of our relationship, that I was like, I can't even be in this relationship for more than 1 second, because I can't be with someone who cuddles onto me when I should be cuddling onto them. And it's so silly, but if I could feel so strongly that way, then I imagine men could feel really strongly the opposite. You know what I'm saying? And like they're allowed to feel that way. And the last question is, the more successful the woman, the harder it is to date. I think it depends on what the success looks like. I think for someone, using that corporate role as an example, like that person, work is life. And there's not much room for like, mothering and taking care of people and just putting things before work in that case, right? And we're talking the case of like you're in the office 5 days a week, 9 to 5 or 8 to 7 or whatever it is, right? There's not a lot of room to prioritize your maternal self. But then there's the other type of ambitious, right? Like if you're a very ambitious actress or you're in the arts or you're in a job where you're in a podcast job or a world in which you do work really hard, but it's not 24/7 like focused in an office. You know what I'm saying? And so I think it's really hard because we get all these mixed messages as women, like, work hard and make your own money, but also like don't make enough money that you'll intimidate a guy. It reminds me of the Barbie line, and I'll read it again by America Ferrera because it's so freaking good. I'm going to read the monologue and we'll close out with this. Okay. It's just so good. It's just so good. Okay. Here's the monologue. Of course, there's 100 ads that are popping up. All right. It's literally impossible to be a woman. You are so beautiful and so smart, and it kills me that you don't think you're good enough. Like we always have to be extraordinary, but somehow we're always doing it wrong. You have to be thin, but not too thin. And you can never say you want to be thin. You have to say you want to be healthy, but also you have to be thin. You have to have money, but you can't ask for money because that's crass. You have to be a boss, but you can't be mean. You have to lead, but you cannot squash other people's ideas. You're supposed to love being a mother, but don't talk about your kids all the damn time. You have to be a career woman, but also always have to be looking out for other people. You have to answer for men's bad behavior, which is insane. But if you point that out, you're accused of complaining. You're supposed to stay pretty for men, but not so pretty that you tempt them too much, or that you threaten other women because you're supposed to be part of the sisterhood. But always stand out and always be grateful. But never forget that the system is rigged. So find a way to acknowledge that, but also always be grateful. You have to never get old, never be rude, never show off, never be selfish, never fall down, never fail, never show fear, never get out of line. It's too hard. It's too contradictory. And nobody gives you a medal or says thank you. And it turns out, in fact, that not only are you doing everything wrong, but also everything is your fault. I'm just so tired of watching myself and every single other woman tie herself into knots so that people will like us. And if all of that is also true for a doll just representing women, then I don't even know. Whew, chills. That's really it. I'm so excited to hear your thoughts, and I hope that this opens up a conversation for you, whether you're listening with a significant other or a girlfriend or solo, and have a group chat, whatever it is. I really want to hear it, so shoot me a DM, and as always, thanks for listening and spending time with me.